Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second Flashbots community call. This is a monthly event that we tend to hold at or near the beginning of the month. And now it's almost halfway through the month. So it is halfway through the month. So thanks for bearing with us with a lot of updates. So most of you here may know already, Flashbots, we are a research and development organization formed to mitigate the negative externalities and existential risks posed by MEV to smart contract blockchains, starting with Ethereum. Our primary focus is to enable the permissionless, transparent, and fair ecosystem for MEV extraction. And it seems like we are on the way to achieving our goals. A bit first on our organization update, and then we will proceed to research update, engineering update, and finally, we will share a sneak peek preview of the Flashbots transparency dashboard presented by Robert Miller. So compared to our last community call, one of the most major difference is our core team has grown from essentially 7 to now 9, almost 10 core crew spread across different continents, and with around 20 additional contributors as crew member. From an organizational standpoint, we have essentially been focusing a lot of the effort on the engineering side as of late, in particular as the hash rate adoption has picked up and us exceeding 50%. So essentially upholding the quality of the engineering as a core as a core infrastructure for Ethereum is our topmost priority. And in the Flashbots engineering effort, most of the focus has been on what we call the Flashbots Alpha, which is what has been live since January, which composed of MEV extract or MEV get implementation plus MEV relay. However, in addition, thanks to a very vibrant community, we have also been building up our tooling around for the ecosystem participants to first utilize and provide a continually improved UX on the Flashbots Alpha. We've been rolling out essentially libraries around the for MEV searchers. We've been providing testnet supports. And lastly, one of our core teams' responsibility, we take it on our shoulder, is to essentially provide transparency through maintaining the blockstaff flashbots.net API, and as well as publishing the Flashbots transparency report that hopefully in the future, 1 or 2 months, will morph into a real-time Flashbots transparency dashboard. And lastly, as we have shared in our last community call, our MEV Inspect and Visualize through MEV Explore has been an important effort as part of the joint effort, and now joined by Etherscan and many others in illuminating the dark forest. Another major development over the course of past month has been with MEV SGX, which is crucial to the Flashbots 1.0 roadmap, which we will cover on the engineering updates. On the other hand, research has been where we came from and where we will continue to give back to the community. And without further ado, I would like to invite Alejo Salas, our research director, to share about our focus in the past month on research.
Sure, Tina, thank you. I like it better when you call me sailing master, though. But all right. So welcome everybody to our community call. So this has been a nice month for research. We kicked off a series of blog posts with a post on quantifying the realized extractable value by the different actors in the system, so miners, searchers, and in particular defining a metric for the extractable value cost, which is the sum of negative externalities that the MEV extracting activity imposes on the system. And so it is a summary way of seeing how, to what extent MEV is harmful, and it's what we Flashbots are trying to reduce. And I have to say, there's been talk about how gas prices recently on Ethereum have dropped significantly, and part of that being due to Flashbots actually making everything more efficient, right? And making this cost not being paid by the users, essentially. So reducing this external cost. So one this is on the first point. We will have more coming up. I'll talk about a little bit in a second. We have a community research highlight, so a research post by our community, by Georgios and Leo. This is a very interesting post on looking at the block space economics, both from the supply and demand side. So I encourage you to check that out. And we had a super interesting MEV roast hosted by Vitalik, where we discussed many interesting upcoming topics for MEV, particular MEV on L2 and ETH2. Also, Vitalik suggested the use of Flashbots for account abstraction. So this is one topic we are also looking into. So for MEV fellowships, we have another round of funding. So we have a Flashbots research proposal mechanism. I encourage you all to check our research repository on GitHub. That's our hub for research, where this process is described in detail. Essentially, we have some research areas that we want to tackle, and we open that to the community, so anyone in the community can come and open a GitHub issue with a course idea, or submit an FRP, which is a more well-formed proposal for doing research along one of these topics, and then we issue grants. So we just issued a grant to Hashcloak on working on mempool privacy. All right, so one of our big challenges ahead in terms of roadmap is achieving full privacy. So right now, you know that we run a relay, and we trust that miners will not misuse the bundles we send them. We ultimately want to make a system that stands on its own, and that doesn't need us as a relay, and that is private in the sense that miners do not have the ability to see the bundles we send them, right? So this is part of the research in that direction. One of the directions, the other one we will talk more on the engineering side, is the SGX that Tina already mentioned. Good. So again, I encourage you all to check our research repo, propose issues there, submit FRPs, and we have grants that we will extend to the most promising proposals. So as of next steps for priority in terms of research, we have the second upcoming post on the research series on MEV on ETH2, which has been worked on by our own steward Alex, together with the Prismatic Labs people. So stay tuned. That's going to be super exciting. We're going to announce that when it's out. We're planning on doing some work on fair sequencing. As you might be aware, we got recently criticized by some people that are proponents of fair sequencing, dubbing us like thieves or enablers of thieves. So we really want to be open, and we always welcome criticisms. So we want to be open with what we think about this, and the problem with fair sequencing essentially is who calls what is fair, right? So who decides what is fair? Fair has no universal definition. So anyway, but this is an interesting research topic and something we want to pursue to try to have like a constructive dialogue with the people that are favoring the first sequencing approach over the auctioning one. Quantifying consensus on security harm. This is another topic, again, related to what I said before in terms of extractable value cost and trying to quantify and be very upfront on the extent to which Flashbots is helping the ecosystem. And again, this is going to come back when Robert shows you the dashboard we've been working on. So yeah, that's the update. I encourage you to check the research repo, and back to you, Tina.
Sounds great. Thanks, our sailing master, for keeping us on track. So the next part, I want to mix it up a little bit. Robert, what do you think about sharing a bit of the highlights of the Flashbots transparency dashboard, so that we can, before we sail into the engineering updates, we can have a sense of how much adoption and traction we have been getting, and what may be some concerning trends or interesting insights we may be able to see from this dashboard that will soon, hopefully, be available for everyone to check out real time. Right now, we're collecting feedback. Robert, would you like to share a bit on the Flashbots transparency dashboard?
I'm more than happy to, Tina. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So I will steal the ball from you on the screens here. So like Tina said, in line with our goal of bringing transparency to MEV activity, we want to release these real-time dashboards that surface metrics that we think are important to the community and MEV more broadly. And what I would ask from you in the audience today is if you see any metrics here you think are really important and need to be highlighted more, please give me feedback. And if there are other things that you want to see, please send them to me or add them in our community Discord. You know, we really want to make this a valuable tool for you. So really would just love any feedback on this. So we have 3 different dashboards for 3 different sets of core stakeholders here. We have a dashboard for searchers, for miners, and for the overall network. And there's a lot of information here, so I can't get through it all, but I will try to show you the highlights of it. I'll start with our searcher dashboard. So on our searcher dashboard, we have some top level metrics on adoption by searchers and trying to quantify how many different searchers are using our system at any given time. And this is actually a pretty complex problem because there are several different ways you could measure the unique number of searchers using Flashbots. Instead of choosing just one, we surface 3 different methods here. The number of unique EOAs that end up landing on chain, the number of unique contracts that searchers are interacting with, and the number of unique searchers within the relay. And no matter what way you cut this or what metric you use, it's pretty clear that our graph is going up into the right over time as more searchers enter the system. And in particular, there's been a lot of growth in the last 2 weeks, almost doubling some of our metrics. We've placed almost 32,000 bundles on chain over time, and we can measure 503 total unique searchers within the relay over time. So we're actually retaining most of the unique searchers in the relay that we have, and there's about 70 or so that haven't been active within the last week, which is the discrepancy between this 430 number and 503. I think these graphs are super interesting. We're showing here the distribution of gas prices for the bundles as well as the tail gas price. So as a reminder to everybody, the tail gas price is the gas price of what would have been the last transaction within a block. And when a Flashbots bundle is included in a block, we end up displacing that tail transaction. And we need the bundle to have an effective gas price that is higher than that last transaction in order for it to make sense for the miner to include the bundle in a block. And again, it's sort of difficult to get the right metric for what average bundle gas prices over time. They really vary, as you can see in this chart down here. But I like this top chart that shows you what the minimum bundle gas price is in green over 1 day, what the median is in yellow, and then the 75th percentile of bundle gas prices within a day, and the 25th percentile gas prices within a day in blue and red, respectively. And then the tail gas price is this purple line, which you can see is almost always below the gas prices of the bundles, except for the minimum in a day. And these, over time, are getting higher and higher on average as more competition enters the system, along with these searcher metrics. I'm going to skip over this chart. Again, it's just the gas prices of the mine bundles, except not smoothed out over the day, and you're not taking the median or anything. We have a couple leaderboards here of the top Flashbot searchers by the number of ETH they've paid to the miners, and their average and then total miner payments as well. So if you're interested, you can go and see who is our top EOA, what's the top contract that's being interacted with, and how much money have they paid miners in comparison to others. And spoiler, the top EOA and the top contract is the person that has been sniping token listings. And they had that 100 ETH bundle, I think 2 weeks ago now. And this is a different way of representing the same information of who are our top 25 EOAs that have paid miners the most amount of money, and how do our top 25 compare to the rest of our searchers, our 500 or so searchers. So it turns out that our top 25 account for roughly 80% of the total payment to miners. And it even gets pretty top heavy here with this one EOA in particular paying 14% of all ETH, or 962 ETH to miners in total. And the same sort of story can be told about contracts, except it's a little bit more top heavy, with the top 25 contracts paying out more as a percentage basis than the top EOAs. It's kind of interesting. We do the same thing for gas consumption too. I won't rest on here, but you can see who our top gas guzzlers are in terms of EOAs and contracts. And then we list some of the largest bundles in total in terms of the total miner payout. So most of these are token snipings, I think, except for this 40.25, which is a giant ARB that used our simple arbitrage bot, actually. And then the largest bundles as number of transactions, which are super interesting to see what people are doing. So those are our searcher metrics. Again, would love to hear feedback and hear other things that people find meaningful. So post it in the chat or in our Discord, or DM me on Twitter or something. And I'll switch to the network view of things. So in total, miners have profited 5,276 ETH from running Flashbots. And this metric is what we call realized extracted value, so miner realized extracted value. And it takes the total amount of ETH that a miner has received as part of Flashbots, and it subtracts the opportunity cost of the transactions that they would be displacing. And so you can think of this as sort of the pure profit that they're making from running Flashbots. Right now, we have 55.37% of hash rate that is onboarded to Flashbots. It's sort of difficult to reason about what percentage of this hash rate is actually running MEV Geth at any given time, but we'll get to that in a bit. And you can see some top level metrics on the number of bundles that have been sent to the relay, how many are forwarded to miners, included on chain, and et cetera. And the difference between bundles sent to the relay versus forwarded is a bunch of these bundles received end up failing our simulation. So there's no reason to send them on. You have some top level growth in the number of bundles. I'm going to really quickly fix this. So some top level growth in the weekly number of bundles that have been submitted. And the reason why these numbers drop off is because the week is not over yet. And as such, this number is going to be lower because there's still a couple more days in the week for us to submit bundles. And all of these, again, are just like up and to the right, exponential growth in the last 2 weeks or so. Catalog the rate at which bundles are included in 10,000 block increments. So this is very reflective of the hash rate that is actually running MEV-Geth. A hockey stick up all the way to about 30% of blocks in a 10,000 block range are running or have bundles included in them. And sort of interesting is the rate at which we forward bundles to the miner, which is the percent of time that bundles over time are passing the simulation. The last two things we have for this network view are the amount of times that a Flashbots block was mined where a bundle was actually present in it, which is kind of an interesting metric to view how often our Flashbots searchers are getting within the block. And this is a super meaningful and interesting graph that Scott made, which looks at the amount of transactions on the normal mempool, not through Flashbots, that are paying more than 2 ETH. And you can guess that they're doing this because they're engaging in priority gas auctions. And then the amount of transactions through Flashbots that have paid more than 2 ETH as part of their payment. And there's sort of an inverse correlation that you can look at here. As Flashbots ascends, the PGA gas wars are descending. And maybe this is a strong indicator that Flashbots is reducing overall network congestion. And actually, we don't have any data points after the 5th for the number of 2 ETH transactions through the normal mempool in PGAs. None of them have reached over 2 ETH, I think. So lastly, we have our miner dashboard. Again, super interesting. Like I said before, about 5,000 ETH has been paid to miners that are running MEV-Geth, and this number is their top line profit. So it subtracts the opportunity cost of transactions that they're displacing. And this is the same metric, except done in dollar values, and we're taking the value of ETH at the time that it was paid out instead of just multiplying this number by the value of ETH. When you look at it over time, we are getting an average of 0.17 extra ETH to miners that are running MEV-Geth. And this is a slightly outdated number, but the currently onboarded hash rate, as you saw before, is a little bit less than that. Yeah, 55%. So that needs to be updated. And you can look at this average per block profit and weekly profit from Flashbots over time, again, up and to the right. And it's interesting to see the totals per week, as well as going in and seeing which particular miner is realizing the most value from Flashbots, who's getting paid the most, of course, according to their hash rate over time. And monthly, which I find a little bit easier to reason about because you can just multiply monthly by 12 and come to annual rates. This is a super interesting graph. So this looks at the effective gas price of Flashbots bundles. And then it looks at the gas price of transactions that were displaced by Flashbots bundles. So what I was calling the tail gas price earlier. And you can see here, this is in logarithmic actually. So these numbers are way higher than the tail gas price. And Flashbots bundles are almost always paying far, far, far greater than the transactions that they are displacing over time. There's an interesting distribution of the profits of Flashbots bundles here. So, in a given 10,000 block range, how large are the profits comparative to all the other bundles? So in here, for example, 53% are within 1/100th of an ETH to 1/10th of an ETH. Trying to speed up a little bit here, we show how often Flashbots bundles are included by miners per 10,000 blocks. So in a 10,000 block range on this particular week, there was about 3,000 bundles that were included. And you can sort of use this graph in order to infer the amount of hash rate that's running MEV-Geth at any given time. Lastly, there's this bundle inclusion rate, which you previously saw on the network, so I won't go over it too much more. And we have some leaderboards here for the top miners that are getting paid the most ETH, that have earned the most ETH rather, and that on average are making the most ETH from the blocks that they mine using MEV-Geth. And over time, we can actually measure this. The MEV reward is a percentage of vanilla rewards. So we're currently sitting at about 5% extra miner income from running MEV-Geth. And we can look at the median bundle gas price versus the median tail gas price, which tells a pretty similar story to the gas price graphs that we've seen thus far. And the interesting thing here is like these trailed each other for a long time, about 2 months of Flashbots being out open in the wild, which implies that if you had a bundle, you could sneak in just above what the tail gas price was. Of course, it always has to be above on any given block. But at around March 1st, this median bundle gas price increased greatly. And what you can infer from that is competition for inclusion in a Flashbots block increased a lot over that period of time, and it's getting more competitive over time as well. So those are all of the metrics that I have. Tina, I don't know if you want to stop and get comments or feedback, or if we want to move on to the rest of the agenda.
I think there's a lot of questions going on in the side chat. I suggest everyone leave your questions, and we can on the side chat, and then we can come back to it towards the end of the call. Because there will be a lot of questions. I would not be surprised. Once again, we're very, very interested in getting this dashboard out to you as soon as possible. Once we fix, as you can see, as we're sharing, there's still some inconsistency we're trying to correct across our table. A lot of the charts we need to know what you care about, what you want to see, and we also need to respect a lot of the the data, the privacy of the individual searcher bots on the network. So how to strike a balance is currently what we're trying to resolve. So once you have the dashboard, if anyone is interested in testing them out, feel free to reach out to Robert. We have essentially just like all of our Flashbots product, because they're going to be readily available soon. So feel free to ping Robert if you would like to test it and give some feedback before we release the V0 version on Metabase. Great. So shall I take over the screen sharing?
Of course.
So next, I would like to invite our captain, Stefan, to share a bit about our engineering timeline. And in light of a lot of things has happened, Berlin happened last night, and Flashbot, over 50% happened to Flashbots. So what has the core engineering team been up to? Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can see.
Perfect. Steph, go ahead.
Sweet. Thanks, Tina. And that dashboard looked incredible. I can't wait to have that in the public and for people to play around with. Okay, the alien is dancing. Perfect. Then I have everything set up correctly. So we've been really busy on the engineering side. Luckily enough, we've had the chance to grow the reliability of our relay over the last few months since we launched the alpha at the beginning of January. So we've been able to handle the additional load from all the new interest quite well. Things have been scaling up nicely. Most of our focus, however, has been around accelerating the way that we ship new features. So now that we are working with about 12 different pools and they all have their own implementation, yeah, that's a good one, relayability. And they all have their own implementation of MEV-Geth. There's some coordination required to make sure that the upgrades happen seamlessly amongst all of them, and there isn't some change in the way that each of them do bundle inclusion, because that could have a material impact on the revenues that the searchers actually have. So how are we going about this? Well, we proposed an upgrade process, which you'll be able to find on the discussion board under the V0.2 proposal. If you look at the Flashbots PM repo. And this proposes essentially a process through which we collect feedback from the community, propose a spec, implement the reference implementation, as well as a formal specification for MEV gap. And then we provide time for miners to integrate and start rolling out the new updates to their nodes. We want to process everything as rolling upgrades so that during a given point in time, we can have a versioning across two breaking changes that are reflected out to the searchers, such that the searchers default to upgrade to the new version, but they can specify if they want to remain on the previous version. And then at which point they would only be pointed towards the miners who are running the previous version. So now that we have the process together, then the question is, what do we actually put into the V0.2 release? We have sort of the core proposal that has the list of all the features that we've identified as being core priorities. Some of them that you guys have been asking for a while around bundle merging is definitely something that we're looking to integrate. Also changing some things around the bundle pricing and around some of the performance on communication side between the relay, searchers, and miners. And I'd say finally, the big change that we're proposing is a structured approach to defining what are the fair market principles that Flashbots aims to uphold for the ecosystem as a whole. As you guys are aware, in the Flashbots alpha, we have incomplete cryptographic guarantees, right? And there's a requirement for some level of trust in any relay that the searcher uses, but also any miner that receives the bundles from the searchers. And so these guidelines essentially provide a set of rules by which miners and ourselves, Flashbots, can be expected to uphold. And if we don't, essentially the community can be really angry at us and shun us. And potentially, if a miner does not uphold these principles, we can withhold future bundles from them until they come back into compliance with it. So I encourage you guys to read through these Flashbots fair market principles. It should answer a lot of questions around the trust requirements of the system, and would love some feedback on these. So for the V0.2 release, the proposal has a timeline, and it's expected to be launching towards the beginning of the month of May. We're still in the phases of collecting some feedback and building the reference implementation. And we've actually released a pre-release to the miners that includes some changes to the bundle pricing algorithm, as well as the ability for all bundles to be atomic and to never revert on-chain. So both of these changes aim to better uphold the initial design that we were striving towards as a system, which is to prevent reverts from landing on chain, as well as always produce more profitable blocks than vanilla blocks. So we released them as a pre-release so that the miners had a chance to upgrade to those early. And it shouldn't have any consequences for searchers. It should just improve their guarantees. But the remaining features, we likely won't release them until the end of the month. So we're still collecting feedback on these. We'd love for you guys to come engage with us on the discussion boards and tell us what we should build and how. So that pretty much covers it, I think, on the engineering side. So Tina, I'll pass it back to you.
Sounds great. I have a couple questions for our captain here. So Would you please share with everyone here a bit more details on the latest pre-release and how it impacts the searcher and the miner? Because we have already seen 5 out of 12 mining pools finish adopting the changes that we have released in the pre-release 2 days ago, and they're very quick to make the changes. So, so that those changes will quickly be reflected if you run the bot and to see the success rate. So perhaps share a bit on how the change that just got implemented will impact two sides of the markets.
Sure. Yeah. Good point. So let's maybe look at the bundle pricing first. So the original formula was calculating an implied gas score for each bundle. Looking at, I'm looking at the first equation up here. So it's looking at V direct, which is direct miner payments, along with the summation of the gas price times gas used of all the transactions in the bundle. And then it's dividing that by the total gas used in the bundle. And so this gives us an implied gas price in terms of GWay, which allows us to sort the transactions and select the best one to be included. Now, there's some concerns around this because it creates an incentive for searchers to essentially accelerate their bundles by bringing regular transactions from the mempool that may not have been picked up by the miner, or use some sort of race condition such that they're evaluated before the vanilla block is processed. And this allowed for some less profitable bundles to end up landing on chain. Still within a very reasonable margin of error, but regardless, in an attempt to mitigate some of these issues, we've effectively removed gas prices from the bundle scoring equation. So at the bottom here, what you see is the new scoring equation that only looks at direct payments over gas used. So now any bundle that gets included will need to do a direct payment, and only the direct payment is considered valid. So this changes some things on the searcher side for how they can estimate the amount of value that they are delivering to the searchers. If any, I mean to the miners, if any of the searchers are using purely gas price, that will no longer be compatible. And then on the miner side, like I mentioned, this should eliminate some edge cases, some race conditions where less profitable bundles were being included. So the second change, which is on bundle reversions. So this is an issue where there could be some undeterministic behavior based off of branching code paths. I think Robert had a great example of that, of a sandwich trader being targeted by both either salmonella tokens or I don't remember what the name of the second version, I think the YOLO chain token. They would both cause reverts in the bundles that were unexpected and weren't being caught through simulation. And so this change to the MEV get level of the system essentially prevents these kinds of reverts from landing on chain, and thereby upholding the objectives that Flashbots has, which is to keep chain congestion of MEV activity to a minimum. So yeah, on the miner side, less reverts. On the searcher side, less reverts, and that pretty much covers it.
Great. And same question applies to some of the more, I would say, interesting changes that we're proposing and collecting feedback. Maybe sharing a bit more light on the implication. The changes that hasn't actually been incorporated, but is collecting feedback, in my opinion, are major changes that affects both miners and searchers, and including how you write your bots, as well as how much your pool can make. So Stefan, would you like to also give more color on how the following 5 core V0.2 features that we plan on implementing, but we'd like to hear from the community and how that impact miners and searchers.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot to go through here, but I'll try my best to give a highlight of what they are and why I personally think that they're important. So first off is bundle merging. So up to this point, the way that Flashbots worked was a pure auction between all searchers for inclusion at the top of the next block. That's great for searchers that find really profitable strategies, but there might be searchers that are looking more at the long tail of strategies that are slightly profitable, but aren't able to compete with some of the large transactions. So bundle merging essentially proposes a method by which we can combine both of those systems. Now, the open question that we have at Flashbots is, where should the bundle merging occur? And there's essentially three levels at which it can occur. It can happen on MEV Geth directly, it can happen on the relay, or it can happen on the searcher side. And so we're still in the discussions of where exactly that should take place. In the proposal, what you'll see is an algorithm for how the merging can take place at MEV Geth, but we're concerned that there might be some inefficiencies in doing it there, and it might bring in some side effects. And so it would be great to get some feedback on at which level do you guys believe the bundle merging should happen, and is there any concerns that you have with the algorithms proposed for merging on MEV Geth? The next big change is the proxy payment contract. So this payment contract would essentially provide a standard way for direct payments to happen for all miners who are receiving bundles from the Flashbots relay. There's a few maybe a few design goals that we have in building a smart contract for rounding payments. One of them is it provides better guarantees or better ways for the miners to query the amount of value that they've received from MEV. This has been a very common request because up to now, the only way that they could do it is by either inspecting transaction traces on the chain or querying our API, where we essentially inspect the transaction traces on their behalf and provide them the results. They were asking for a more native way where they could simply query their node to obtain these values. And this is directly enabled by a smart contract because we can log all the payments as events, and they can query for those. The other feature has been requested is splitting off the payments from MEV to be separate from the payments for inclusion. And particularly doing so in a trustless way. So this new contract, what it provides is a way for the block.coinbase address to specify a recipient that gets forwarded the MEV payments. One way that I think is interesting to think about this is in the 1559 world post-July, this allows a miner to specify who receives the base fee and a different address to receive the tips. The tips being sort of in this version of the world, the MEV Flashbots payments. So the other third design consideration is not actually one that we rolled out in this version of the proxy contract, but one that we would love to roll out in the future, which is to improve the security of the chain as a whole by creating an economic incentive for, or maybe I would say an economic disincentive for preventing time-banded attacks. So time-banded attacks are essentially attacks where miners see the history of blocks on Ethereum, and they notice that there was a large MEV event that exposed, potentially millions of dollars in value, but is vulnerable to being, would have been vulnerable to being front run. So what the miner can then do is essentially start mining on an old part of the chain and start accumulating new blocks on that new chain. Potentially hiring a bunch of hash rate or buying a bunch of hash rate on hash rate marketplaces, and creating a multiple block deep reorg of the chain to be able to capture this MEV opportunity and essentially steal it. So that's called a time bandit attack, and it has some serious negative externalities on the network because it breaks finality. Essentially, it creates what's called consensus instability, where it's more difficult to know if your transaction has successfully been included in the chain, because a chain tip always gets reorged. So that's the major concern that we at Flashbots have about the dangerous nature of MEV. I'd say one of the two existential risks that we've set out to mitigate, the other one being centralization. But these time bandit attacks can potentially be mitigated by having some smart contract that is able to spread the MEV fees across multiple future blocks, thus creating a bounty or an incentive for continuing to mine on the longest chain. So that's something that we're looking to roll out in the future, and the proxy payment contract provides the first step in that direction. Let's see. I'll cover the next three relatively quickly. So full block submission on MEV Geth provides a way for the relay to provide a full block template to the miners. And this essentially brings up the opportunity for us to do bundle merging on the relay side, or provide searchers with the ability to do bundle merging themselves. So it's opening up a path for us to be able to introduce those new levels of bundle merging. The next change, WebSockets, is simply to improve the performance of communication between searchers, the relay, and miners by routing everything over WebSockets instead of HTTP RPC. And then finally, the strict profit switching. So this has been to help further mitigate a potential race condition in which the Flashbots blocks get validated and processed faster than the vanilla blocks on MEV Geth. And in particular for miners who are running a second layer of profit switching on top of MEV Geth, they might not update their blocks as frequently. And so they might be mining on a suboptimal Flashbots block for longer than they would otherwise. So this just adds a config parameter to MEV Geth that allows miners to specify they only ever want to mine on Flashbots if they've already seen a valid vanilla block for this chain height. So it simply provides stronger profit switching guarantees for the miners. It's an optional configuration, which is sort of up to the mining pools to manage how they deploy it, and it shouldn't have an impact on the searchers. So I think that's it. Tino, back to you.
Hear you.
Oh, great. Didn't realize I was on mute. Yeah, thanks for the presentation and the explanation. I actually have one more question for you. I think everyone here would benefit from is the engineering update on what's next on the roadmap.
Definitely. So I think Alejo touched on this earlier about how important privacy and mempool privacy in particular is to the efforts that Flashbots is trying to achieve. There's some level of privacy that we're able to provide in the alpha, but it's privacy based on trust. And that is not a stable equilibrium in the long run, because the trust guarantees can essentially be can break down over time. So what we want to do is get to a point where we have cryptographic guarantees as soon as possible. And that's what the MEV SGX specification aims to provide. So it introduces the two core properties. One of them is cryptographic privacy, and the other one is DOS protection for miners. And under an MEV SGX world, the Flashbots relay doesn't need to exist anymore, and it doesn't need to be a trusted counterparty. Instead, anyone is able to build their own relay or connect directly with miners to submit Flashbots bundles. And then on the spam side, spam protection side, essentially the MEV SGX also introduces this ability for anyone to make proofs on the value that's being contained in their bundles without having to process the validity of those bundles. And so it provides a way to scale the amount of inbound bundles without introducing a DOS vector. So we're really excited about this. And this will bring sort of a truly decentralized private mempool to Ethereum, and will remove us as a trusted counterparty in the system. So it's really at the core of what we're trying to achieve, and we're making good progress on it. So you can expect a proposal to be posted soon with the details of the specification.
All right, so I think that's all the content that we have prepared for presentation. And next, let's go into questions. I know that we're coming up on time, so feel free to drop if you need to hop off to your daily work meetings, but we'll be here hanging out to take some questions here. And just a couple additional notes. The core V0.2, there we have posted a formal spec. I think it's linked somewhere in here. Oh, yes. The formal specification is on the GitHub. So definitely read through and post your comments by the end of this week so that we can incorporate all of the feedback into our next major release. And for additional colors on MEV SGX, we had a presentation on it on March 25th at the MEV Roast, and the content is already posted. The video and the slides were posted on the PM repo. So you can check it out for to learn more about the architecture and how it works. And so let's move on to questions. Maybe raise your hand or just directly unmute if you would like to discuss or share any thoughts, and welcome anyone from the Flashbots crew to share some thoughts in response.
So maybe one thing that we can do here is, if you have a question, drop it in the chat, and then I can call upon you to unmute and ask your question, and then we can discuss it. There was a good question from Shane, I think, talking about the bundle selection formula. So if Shane, if you're still here and you want to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I was just curious, because the new formula is the amount that you pay to the miner divided by the gas used. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so if you could imagine one bundle which uses a lot of gas and another bundle which doesn't use as much gas, like let's say twice as much, then the one that uses twice as much has to pay the miner twice as much. But from the perspective of the miner, you know, that might already be at a very high gas price. So they might prefer the one that pays twice as much, the one that pays a half. So I'm just curious if that scenario, or how the formula deals with that scenario, or how it could be, you know, possibly changed to deal with that scenario.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It does create some concerns on, like, it is essentially over indexes the opportunity cost that you're displacing, because it incentivizes for smaller bundles. I think in general, any equation that divides by the gas used is going to have this problem. We're aware of like what the perfect system is, right? Which is to simulate a full block with each bundle and then compare the profitability of the full block. But our expectation is that that's too computationally expensive. to be able to scale well on the MEV Geth nodes of the miners. So we're concerned that it just wouldn't be feasible for us to do that kind of comparison on the miner side.
Yeah, thanks.
Wow, what a quiet audience today. Any comments in general? Just, I think, just feel free to unmute yourself or speak up. We're here, all ears.
Yeah, we should also welcome questions on the dashboard if you guys are curious about that.
I think for because we the Flashbots team is pretty distributed and we have many work streams. It's just amazing to see every time during community call our progress from different front come together. So also feel free to if there's anyone who are impressed with each other's work, give some comments and suggestion on how the engineering side has been moving and maybe some ideas or thoughts you would like to share on the research side as well. I wonder if Phil, you have anything to share with the community?
No, not really. Really excited to see all you guys here. I think we saw kind of the next steps in the research roadmap and would really love to get some engagement on asking these hard questions. I think we're still like in a phase of formalizing our organizational design. That's kind of what we're working on now. So giving people easy onboarding into working on research and making sure that output is useful and people have a clear idea of kind of how the research we're doing contributes to the Flashbots narrative and contributes to this engineering side we've seen presented. So I encourage you guys to subscribe and to join our research calls and continue participating in the Discord. I promise we'll have some more kind of formal process very soon in the next like month or two. We're still kind of setting up the organizational backend we need to support all of that, and very excited to share some of the things we're thinking through on that front soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil, for sharing. We've been having a lot of really, the reason why we started hosting community call is we take governance of our project very seriously. And we are happy and proud of ourselves to want to experiment with unconventional governance that doesn't get, isn't about formality, isn't about what we show, but it's more about how it actually works. So I would also encourage the community in the future to kind of share some of the best practices with us in terms of how we bridge the communication between the core team and the community. How can we break the boundaries and how can we communicate more effectively? For example, if we within the Flashbots core crew, we encourage peer-to-peer communication rather than a top-down approach. So if all of us are in Discord, and you can see our color probably in pink or in some other color. And if you would like to have a one-on-one chat with us, I think we can always arrange either a call or essentially direct DMs to incorporate some of the feedbacks that you may have about our community, of how you would like to contribute. Currently, the work we do is technical. So a lot more of the communication will be more centered around technical contribution. But essentially how you would like to partake in any of the open source repo or in any of the open research questions. I think there's sufficient documentation around the Flashbots GitHub to get you a head start, but always reach out to us on Discord. Well, I think this is near the end of our call. I want to point to this exciting event that's happening recently is the ETH Global Scaling Hackathon. I believe we're going to give a few talks and potentially host a special MEV session where we dive deep into MEV and scaling. Also, some of our community members from Flashbots are looking for teammates to hack on cool scaling solutions incorporating MEV auction. So also reach out to us if in Discord if you are interested in jamming in joining us in working with any of the scaling team to implement some kind of a prototype of MEV auction on scaling solutions. So that's that. I guess we can end almost in a timely fashion. 5 minutes overtime, 4 minutes. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.